Constitution Committee. I'd just like to let you know that the meeting will be recorded and live streamed. If we can start off with the first item on the agenda, can we elect a chair, please? Councillor Rathbone.
Thank you. I'm happy to accept chairing this meeting this evening. So let's move on to item 2, which is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies?
Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Steinberger and Bramble.
And I note that Councillor Troughton is attending remotely. Thank you. So item 3 is declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? Okay, perfect. So item 4 is the terms of reference. I don't know whether anyone's planning to speak to this. Dawn, were you planning to speak to it? Louise, okay, lovely. Thanks, Louise. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. This item is here just for the committee to note the terms of reference. The terms of reference were agreed by full council when it established the committee on the 26th of January this year. So this item is just for noting.
Thanks very much, Louise. Does anyone have any questions or comments on that? I can see your hand up, Councillor Troughton. Do you want to come in?
Yes, please. I noticed that the terms of reference say that the Constitution Committee has no decision-making powers and will make recommendations to full council. But then in the report, it requests the committee to make decisions. So I just think that there's a bit of tidying up there to do.
Can you clarify that position, Louise? Thank you.
Chair, yes, in terms of the formalised changes to the Constitution, those will rest with full council, as it is that decision-making body that has the power to amend the council's constitution. The decisions that you are taking tonight are going to enable those officers to ensure that the constitution is drafted and revised, and it will then subsequently be put forward to full council for final decision making. But it's to enable us to start that process in terms of the format, if you like, that the new constitution will adopt. Because without those types of decisions, then the redrafting of the constitution becomes effectively a moot point, because we have no sort of guidance that we can follow when we're doing that work.
Sorry, if I could come back, Chair. I understand that, you know, but that's not what the terms of reference say. And the terms of reference, I think we do need to look at that and amend them to read that the committee itself has no powers to change the constitution, but only has powers in relation to you know, the recommendations that it will make, which are set out as in the report. It's just a tidying up thing, but you know, I think the terms of reference do need to be corrected, if you don't mind me saying.
So, sorry, Councillor Troughton, can you just refer us to the exact line on the draft terms of reference? Because I mean, what I'm reading is that the Constitution Committee has no decision-making powers and will make recommendations to the full council, but I probably missed something.
No, that's correct. That's what it says. But then if you look at the report, sorry, I'll have to, it says in the report on page 12 of the Constitution
agenda pack.
Refresh, it says the committee endorsed the vision, approved the proposed format, approved the work programme. So those are decisions that the Constitution Committee is being asked to make. But the terms of reference, the committee has no powers to make decisions. And all I'm saying is that the terms of reference need to say that the committee has no powers to decide on the constitution, but only powers, you know, to make recommendations. You know,
I understand.
And to approve the recommendations that will be made. You know, it's just a matter of tidying up, but it's just poorly worded at the moment, Chair.
Yeah, I mean, okay, yeah. Do you want to respond to that, Louisa?
Yes, thank you, and indeed, thank you, Councillor Troughton. Yes, more than happy to ensure that when the terms of reference go back to the AGM, or rather the committee is reformalised after the AGM, or at the AGM rather, excuse me, that there's a note about the terms of reference and that those matters are corrected. Obviously, the vision for the Constitution is just a matter for officers and this committee in terms of our approach to it. The work programme is entirely a matter for this committee, but I do take the point about the second recommendation on approving the format. So we will ensure that that tidy up is made at the AGM.
But those three things are part of the decision-making powers of this committee. That's I think that needs to be stated in the terms of reference. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Troughton. Are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Rathbone? Thank you. So we've got no other questions or comments. Okay. So we're happy to proceed to agenda item 5, which is Constitution refresh, pages 11 to 22. Okay. Are you speaking to this as well? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have anything particular to add to the report that's before you this evening. Obviously happy to take questions. The committee may wish to note that we have the officers who form the officer working group here this evening, either within the meeting room or online. If it would be helpful for them to introduce themselves and explain a bit about who they are and what they do within the organisation, more than happy for that to be done if you would like that, Chair, or alternatively we can simply move on and open the debate on the actual report itself.
I think it would be very helpful if the officers present could introduce themselves, starting with the officers present in the chamber. So do you want to introduce yourself? Yeah.
Good afternoon. So my name is Kenshiro Konta. I'm a trainee solicitor, and I am happy to be part of the committee.
Good evening to everyone. My name's Dawn Carter MacDonald, and I'm the Director of Legal and Governance, Legal Now, Democratic Services and also Elections. And it's a new title, which I've forgotten, but I'm happy to be a part of this committee, and I'm sure that we'll be able to do some really great work together. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Louise Humphreys. I am the Head of Legal and Governance at the Council.
Very much. And then online, starting with Peter.
Good evening. I'm Peter Gray, Governance Officer, and I'm one of the officers working on the Officers Constitution Review Group.
Thank you very much. And Lucinda, please.
Good evening. I'm Lucinda Bell. I'm the Education Lawyer for the Council.
Okay, thanks very much. So we've got quite a formidable team, I think. So do you want to speak to the report in a little bit more detail, or?
Happy to do so. The first item that the committee is being asked to endorse is the proposed vision statement that will serve as the framework for obviously the objectives of both officers and this committee as it undertakes its review and refresh. And you'll see that that is set out at paragraph 4.1 of your report. The report then goes on to detail the officer's proposed new format for the Constitution, which you'll find at Appendix 1 of your report. And that appendix sets out both the existing format and the proposed new format side by side, so you can see the relevant parts that currently exist and we're proposing to introduce or move current content around in the new format. And then Appendix 2, where new sections of the Constitution are proposed, or, for example, in the new Part 1, Your Council, the overview, where we're proposing to amalgamate some text that appears in other places within the current Constitution. There's an explanation about what the purpose of those new sections is. So that is a very, very brief canter through the report. Happy to take any questions and or comment on any debate that members may wish to have.
Thanks very much, Louise, and thanks for all the work that's been done in advance of this meeting. Yeah, a couple of initial questions for me. I mean, firstly, is there a sort of yeah, I mean, we've got the sort of proposed timeline here as a sort of guide, really, to how we're going to sort of be outlining this project. I mean, that's something that's obviously could be more populated in more detail as things unfold. Is that right? Yeah. But the other thing is really about the accessibility issue of this, which, and I think making it sort of user-friendly and accessible online, and having a, you know, and having it a platform that really works for people, being able to access it is a really important part of that. So just really wondering what sort of resource we've got available in relation to that. Thank you.
Well, as we go through this process, we'll be working very closely with our colleagues at ICT and also our colleagues who deal with the Council's website to ensure that the formatting that we're adopting is obviously accessible for people, if that's because they have a visual disability, or that, you know, so that we're fully cognizant of those matters, and also so that when it appears either online or in a paper version, as we have to have both, that they are equally able for people to navigate in a very easy manner, very user-friendly, because that is part and parcel of the rationale for this work, is to improve upon the accessibility of the Constitution generally. And that's partly why that we're proposing a reorganisation of the parts, and actually the creation of more parts, so that there is greater clarity and greater distinction and assistance for people to navigate the document. So where possible, we will be using hyperlinks so that people can easily move around. We will be splitting the Constitution up into the various sections and parts and sections, as well as having, as we currently do, one holistic document, which, because of then is very, by nature, it's very lengthy, can become quite unwieldy to navigate, but recognising that different people like to access documents in different ways. So that what we're proposing at the moment is that each section within each part will be a document in its own right. So if you're specifically looking, say, for example, the council procedurals, you can immediately go to that one document alone and don't then have to navigate your way through the 100 pages that may precede it to get to that section. But yes, we will be working very closely with our ICT colleagues to ensure that it is as accessible as we can make it.
Yeah. News, and obviously, you know, searchable as possible as well. And it's really good news to hear about the sort of proposed groupings. Obviously, this is something we'll be working on as the process unfolds. Are there any other questions or comments on the vision? Councillor Rathbone?
Okay, I don't think you can see me, you can just hear me, and which is just as well, really. On the part 6, where it mentions deputations, it says how to make a deputation, how the deputation will be dealt with, which is really good. I think that information wasn't very clear before. There's usually a form as well that you have to fill in. Will that be included within the Constitution, or is, because that would be quite useful, I think, for people to see what the form is. Although it really relates to councillors, that form, I think it's important for it to be there so people, the public, can actually see what they have to write in. Yeah.
Thank you. Is that I mean, we probably all agree with that, but just it's probably more a comment. But just did you want to respond?
Other to say, in terms of how members of the public communicate with us on any issues like deputations and petitions, and even asking us questions, we will be looking at that across the board to ensure that we're trying to make it easy for people to ask us those questions or make those deputations, as well as ensuring that we are provided with the information that we need to take that forward for them. So we'll be looking at whether that's best achieved through asking people to email us, or, as you say, creation of a form, and it may well be that the form approach is the best way to do that.
Could I come back, Chair?
Thank you.
Yeah, because, you know, over the years, actually, when we first started doing all of this, deputations and so on, we had forms were very available. Then they started to disappear, and the whole thing was very difficult for the residents. And I know for me, I'll often say to residents, well, you can bring a deputation if you want. Just how do I do that? Look on the website. It gives you that's what I would like to be able to say. Then it's very clear what they need to do. They don't need me. And they can sort of handle it themselves, maybe come back to me as a councillor or whatever. But also that relates as well to the individual resident questions as well, how you do that, and the petition, how you petition, what you do for petition. And in fact, I know I had a petition about a year ago, and it's one of the things that's not very clear is what you do with the petition. Yes, you can raise a petition over an issue, but what do you do? Do you hand it in to the mayor? Do you hand it in just to the town hall reception? I think it might be good to make that clear. Then that's a fairly easy process. And obviously that gives people assurance. If I hand it into X, wherever it is, and I'll get a receipt back and I'll know that it's then been handed in.
And I would, assuming that we're going to be sort of working through all these, you know, that's really sort of important input. We're going to be working through all these and having to challenge about the practicalities as we work through the sort of process of all these different, and that relates back to the vision statement as well, doesn't it, about it being user focused and accessible. So on page 13. So, which I think is, you know, as you're, I think, saying, really, we're going to have to bear in mind throughout the process. So, I have a question really about, I mean, we've touched on this a little bit about sort of, you know, the equalities impact. I mean, you've obviously touched on the sort of accessibility issue of that, but just really, I don't know whether you can speak a bit more really about how this is going to be sort of, you know, how the sort of public sector equality duty is going to be sort of considered through this piece of work. Thank you.
Well, certainly as we go through this, we'll be taking advice on ensuring that what we are producing meets the equalities impact assessment for the relevant groups. And in addition, we're also, apologies, we will also be looking at obtaining the crystal mark for the final production of the Constitution, which will hopefully guarantee that we meet those requirements in terms of the use of our language in producing the document. And hopefully, as a combination of both those processes, we will have met all of our equalities impact, public sector equality duty. Apologies.
And I think it might be, just trying to sort of think through how to do this, but I think it might be quite useful actually to have, I think probably for the purposes of prompting members as well, while we're in our deliberations, have you know, within the papers reminders of that, and also I think of our, you know, cross-cutting policies as well across the council, you know, in relation to equalities and anti-racism and poverty. So these, I mean, I know they've got different statuses and within the law, and I do get that, but just it's, I think it might be useful to have those sort of reminders to us in our sort of deliberations when we're sort of looking through this project.
Happy to ensure that members have that note, and we can append that to every agenda that is circulated for future meetings.
Brilliant. Rathbone?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've just noticed that of course there would be, ward forums are included in this, and I think we do need to do some work on ward forums, how exactly they happen. I mean, it's an organic thing anyway, but I know at one point we were saying you have to have 3 a year or something. But I think we just need to really tidy that whole thing up. Also, although it's kind of not part of the constitution, it would be good to have a discussion about what kind of support the ward forums are going to get, because the original offer that we had, which maybe we need to chat, which will change, was that they were minuted by an officer, that officer then, as it were, put them onto a corner of the website for each ward, so that residents who went to the meeting or didn't go to the meeting could see what had happened because those minutes were there. Now, we don't do any of that anymore, and I'm not being critical of anybody, it's just what's happened. But I do think we do need to kind of address that and see how we can make that work within the limited kind of resources we now have, and to have a proper discussion, and just to make sure that, for me, I feel, well, some councillors, they don't have ward forums, they have resident meetings. And so maybe we need to just look at that. They don't call them a ward forum because you have a specific residents meeting about a specific issue, maybe on an estate. And so they tend to operate in a different way. A ward forum tends to be a whole ward thing.
Yeah.
Just to say that's the kind of area I think that we do need to look at again, which could really certainly help residents to understand how they interact with councillors and with the council.
Chair, if I could respond to that, yeah. So, thank you for that, Councillor Rathbone. I think what we would propose with regards to ward forums would be that if I could have a conversation with colleagues Sonia Khan and Tracy Anderson, who that area would fall, within their remit, but then ask that they could bring a paper to the next Constitution Committee where a discussion could be held at the committee meeting, and then we could agree with some decisions that we wanted to make with regard to that particular point.
Chair, yeah, thanks very much for that. I think that's a good idea, because as it were, if you have in the Constitution, there will be ward forums. You need to actually, and it may be that we have to change all of that as a result of Sonia Khan's paper and so on. I really do appreciate that, because they know what resources they've got available and what they can offer. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Dawn. So, I mean, obviously, as we sort of, work through this project, we're going to be, interacting with, different officers have got different areas of responsibility. For example, the areas in terms of, planning and licensing and financial conduct, and also, in scrutiny as well. So, and there'll be areas that different members are interested in as well. So, just for sort of my own understanding, for example, when we get to the sections on scrutiny, and then say planning as well, how are they going to interact with the supervisory committees over those areas? What sort of input is there going to be between obviously the officers and members who do that work day to day? Is that for you, Louise? Or sorry, I was looking at Dawn. Yeah.
Well, certainly for matters such as the planning code of practice, work has already begun on a refresh of the planning code of practice at an officer level, and the intention will be the code of practice has to be approved through corporate committee in any event, but the process will be to fully engage with members and also the planning subcommittee itself, and corporate committee when we come to actually looking at that specific element of the Constitution, because it's not just we will be potentially proposing changes as a Constitution committee, but obviously those committees also need to participate in that debate as well. And in the same vein, for example, when we deal with things like the financial procedure rules, we will ensure that we fully engage with the Section 151 officer to see if there are any amendments that they would like to put forward to that particular part of the Constitution, either specifically or more generally with regards to wording, to embody what the Constitution Committee is trying to achieve with its constitution. So there is a full range of opinions and people inputting into this process.
Yeah, I mean, just, yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of moving parts to this, but I mean, again, is there any sort of, for example, in planning, there are some, you know, some quite significant stakeholders, you know, planning, is there any sort of role for them, or is that going to be through the relevant committees, really, any sort of consultation with them?
Well, at an officer level, we will consult with them as we're doing the work. The officers that are currently working on the Planning Code of Practice involve officers from legal, from governance, and also from the planning department. So that work is already ongoing with a full suite of officers across the board. And then because we clearly need the planning subcommittee to be involved in the process because it affects how they approach their decision making. It has to be approved by the corporate committee in due course. And then we will then bring it to the Constitution Committee to say, right, it's been through these consultative processes. This is now the proposed wording. And now it's for the Constitution Committee to either say, yes, we think this is appropriate wording for that part of the section, and we can recommend that to full council, or in fact, you know, we would actually like to see some further changes to it. And then it may well be that we have to go back around all the processes, but we will certainly ensure that where we need to consult with, whether they be officers or indeed a scrutiny panel, for example, that those consultations actually take place. In terms of scrutiny, we're not, at the moment, we're not envisaging any major change. The change to the Constitution predominantly is going to be whereas currently the Constitution deals with the call-in procedure as part of the overall section on the scrutiny panels and commissions, what we're proposing is to bring that out into a separate section in its own right, again, to make it much easier for members to know when they can call in decisions and how they can call in decisions, because at the moment, quite frankly, it's a bit hidden in that section. And I struggle to find it for when I need to refer to it, if I'm brutally honest. So that's the type of work that we want to ensure happens, as I say, because it's all part of the accessibility and the manner in which both members, officers and the public engage with the Constitution.
Thank you, that's really helpful. So, Councillor Rathbone?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So I just wanted to come back a bit on that, and I really do appreciate what you said about calling, because probably in the history of this sort of present council since 2002, I've been one of the main people to do call-ins, and I'll be very frank, that it has been somewhat obscured over the years, and I'm really glad that we need to be transparent about that, very much so. It's actually quite important. We don't want to see it being used very often or at all, really. You should be able to resolve things, and I think in any presentation about it, I think it has to be clear as well that before you arrive at that point of calling, that there is a discussion, and I don't think that is there. And it wasn't really there in the past. It was like assume, you know, for instance, that you talk to a cabinet member first, and so on. None of that was ever. So for myself, I found myself in a lot of hot water because I just did what was required, which was, you know, to do the call-in with 5 councillors. But then, you know, it was an unspoken part of the Constitution. I think this is why this is so important, what we're doing, that it is written down so that actually residents can see as well that, you know, that this is what happens. So thank you very much for spotting that. And I should be watching that myself to make sure that we do get that right and it is nicely transparent.
Councillor Troughton, did you have any comments or questions?
Thank you, Chair. No, I look forward to, you know, looking at getting into the detail of this. I have to say that, you know, I think the officers have made an excellent start. You know, I really welcome the new structure. It'll be, you know, a lot easier to navigate. And really, I think, you know, we need to concentrate on process and not rhetoric, you know, people need to know what to do, not necessarily the whys and wherefores. So I think a very good start has been made, and thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Troughton. I think if members don't have any further comments, one final comment from me. I mean, if I've understood the final paragraphs correctly, there's sort of limited statutory guidance in relation to that's relevant to this. It's slightly obscure what its status is. But I mean, I also wonder whether we're looking for sort of examples from comparable local authorities and what sort of findings you've made in relation to that. Thank you.
Certainly at the officer group level, we are fairly consistently looking at what other local authorities have in their constitutions, what phraseology they use in their constitutions, and if it's not too cheeky, what we like and what we dislike about other authority constitutions when it comes to how we approach the revisions and redrafting of our constitution. So certainly no, we're not intending to start drafting from absolutely from scratch again. It's about improving and enhancing the current constitution. But yes, we're certainly not afraid of looking to see what other people do, both positively and negatively.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments on this section of the meeting? No, everyone's happy. So now move on to item 6, which is any other business. Are there any items of any other business? Nope. Yep. I will now close the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.